Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in 5 minutes. Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in 2 minutes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Masonic Seminar Series. My name is Brother Co-Masonry, and I am the facilitator of this. I want to welcome everybody into the new year. I hope that you had a wonderful holiday, however you celebrated it. I also want to welcome you to Masonic Seminar Series. As we start a new lineup of sessions this month, we'll be talking about Freemasonry and the path of spiritual transformation, which I think hits home for most everybody here, because that's probably a little bit not big reason why all of this are here on this particular. To give a little bit of background about the Masonic series, we were formed in 2018-ish. We use it here at Universal Co-Masonry as a way to provide information to those who don't know very much about Freemasonry, feel compelled to learn more about it, but we don't want to give away any of the secrets of the experience, as that is something you must learn about yourself. So we don't talk about rituals in particular. If you are a Mason under obedience, we ask that you do not do that as well. So if I stop with this offended, we are very conservative in what we talk about specifically rituals. So everything we talk about here at Synopsis talks around the idea of what Freemasonry is through the lens of Freemasonry, the ritual and whatnot. I am joined here in the studio with Sandra and Hardo, who help run various platforms that we stream on. So I want to say thank you to them, as well as those that are coming from all around the world, Philippines, in addition to yourself. One moment. Sounds like we're having some time.
How about now? Can you hear me now? See a lot of head shaking. That's good. Well, we'll start over. That's great. It's all about restarting over. So welcome to the Masonic Seminar Series. I'm very glad that you can join me here this month as we start a new year. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season, however you chose to celebrate it. And we are starting here at the Masonic Seminar Series a new lineup of topics. We will meet 10 times throughout the year. We usually take July and August off, but we will be running the rest of the time. A little bit about the Masonic Seminar Series is that we were founded roughly around 2018 as an outreach program of Universal Co-Masonry in order that we could help give some information about what Freemasonry is, so that people who felt a calling to Freemasonry had a little bit more information than just you feel called and then you apply and then you start the journey. There's a bit of a transition period in there that a lot of people are nervous about because you don't know it, even though you feel compelled to follow it. So we started the Masonic Seminar Series for those who are actually of the Eastern Hemisphere to help them understand a little bit more about this Western tradition. And it has since then grown into what it is today. I am going to be your presenter and your facilitator. My name is Brother Katie Kunzier, and I will be talking this evening on Freemasonry and the path of spiritual transformation. We are one of two groups that Universal Co-Masonry offers. The other one is the Masonic Philosophical Society. Some of you may be familiar with that. If you are not, you're welcome to email me and I can get you the information you need. It's just like seminar. It's free. It's open to the public. It's online. We are a little different though, but from MPS as we call it, in that this is a lecture-based series or an anthology, which means that every topic I present each month is going to stand alone. So if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry, I'm not going to build any information on the previous topics that I have covered over the years. And if you're joining us again for the 10th time or the innumerable amount of times, I try to make sure all of our topics are fresh and have a new face or completely new, so that way we can continue growing. That being said, my presentations are built off of what I have learned over the past 20 plus years of being a Freemason with Universal Co-Masonry. So this is my perspective. You will hear others as you talk to more Freemasons on the various questions you might have. I'm joined here in the studio with Brother Patrick Alessandra and Brother Benjamin Hartle, who are running the various platforms. So if you hear me talking to people, it's not that I'm by myself, talking to myself. I'm working with these fine brothers here to help us reach the various groups that are coming in. All right. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. Let me just pull it up here. Can everyone see that okay? Perfect. So when I was sitting down to really kind of look at what this presentation was going to be, I always try to pick topics that are relevant, something that is definitely related to Freemasonry, that would make sense. And I really felt, especially with the start of the new year, many of us don't necessarily do New Year's resolutions. Some of us do. I highly recommend it. It's always good to have goals to always improve ourselves. But I thought, let's talk about transformation, because perhaps this is your year of transformation, or maybe you're just coming out of a year of transformation, or you're preparing for that transformation. You're somewhere in that journey. And I thought that was a really good place to start this session 1 of Masonic Seminar Series. And the more I thought about it, there are different types of transformations, and I really wanted to focus on the one that I believe is one of the most beneficial, which is a spiritual transformation. It is the one that Freemasonry strives for. So that is what we're going to look at. Just looking ahead, we're going to understand the nature of the conflict. Why do we need to transform? Why can't we just be born as is and die as is, and that's okay? Why is there this compulsion for a change? And we're not even talking like a minute change. We're talking about a pretty fundamental, big overhaul of who we are as individuals and as humans. And then we're going to look at each step along the pathway of spiritual transformation. I will preface that there's a lot of different ways to view the path of spiritual transformation. And I thought about doing Dante's Inferno, but I'm presenting for an MPS later on in the month where I'm going to talk about Dante's Inferno, so I didn't want to overlap them, which I highly recommend if you've not read the Divine Comedy to do so. It's very much a very epic poem about spiritual transformation from Dante's view. But I wanted to stay more out of that realm and stay with kind of a Platonic idea. So the route I chose was the Platonic version of spiritual transformation. So if you're into Buddhism and do the Eightfold Path, if you're into other, occult traditions, they're all very, I want to say similar, only in that they have the same goal, which is to transform that which is within us. So we're going to look at the different steps, and the steps are loose in the sense that you can name them various names. They're not canon, they're not doctrine. So they are meant to be malleable and move a little bit and to have a little bit of definition. So that is what we're going to spend our time on. And originally I was just going to do the steps of transformation, just, and you guys can gauge where you are in that process. And I was like, well, there needs to be some context. Like, what compels us to want to change? That's not something that just is in some people and not in others. It is ultimately in everyone. Whether or not we act upon it is what differentiates people from ordinary to extraordinary. And so I wanted to give a contextual landscape to this pathway. And so let's talk about the nature of conflict, that human conflict. So when I'm talking about the human conflict, I'm not talking about the relationship between people, between how people interact in societies and civilization. I'm talking about the intrapersonal, not interpersonal. The intrapersonal, the one that's within us. There is a relationship that's tri-folded. It is 3 in 1. It is the tripartite, as some people would call it, aspect of who we are. And we're looking at that relationship between the body, the soul, which is the last time I'll use that word, and the spirit. That's the relationship we're trying to understand. If we can understand that relationship, then we can understand how the path of transformation, spiritual transformation, works. That's very, very important. Knowledge, and not just from a Platonic standpoint, but from a Masonic standpoint, knowledge is essential. It is essential. It doesn't matter how we feel about it, right? We're in this post-truth era where someone's feelings are more important than the facts at hand. And that's not to invalidate or to relegate emotions as bad. it's a misplacement of those emotions. How we feel about something does matter, but at the end of the day, it doesn't come up and over the truth of a situation. So the human conflict that I am speaking to is with these three different aspects of who we are. Now, the reason why I said I would not say the word soul again is because I'm going to use the word psyche. Today's modern connotation of soul is it can be religious, and not that I have a problem with that, but it has a very specific meaning. And I'm going to take back that meaning and put it in the terminology, the nomenclature of Platonism, and call it psyche. And so I want to define it. Obviously, we'll know some of these definitions, but just so that we're on the same understanding. I am going to ask that if you disagree with the definition, just for the next hour and a half, just agree with me so that we can have a common ground to talk on. And then I would love to hear your thoughts if you want to send me an email or whatever about how you think it should be defined elsewhere. That's totally appropriate. So the body is as it's defined. It is material form. It's materiality. It's that which has come from the earth. It's the golem form, if you will. The psyche is something different. Now, keep in mind, back in Plato's time, the Greeks didn't have the word soul. Soul didn't exist until much later, the word. They called it psyche. And the psyche is very different than the mental bodies. For those who may be more familiar with the theosophical aspects, the 7 different bodies of man, a lot of people will try to say, well, the soul is the mental body. It's a part of it, but it is not all of it. They're not equal to each other. When you look at the psyche is going to be the principle of life. It's the life force and the movement. It's everything that's in the body that gives it animation. If you wanted to understand where the mental body plays a part in the psyche, that's going to be with the psyche. It is a part of the psyche. It is where you're going to have your reason, your judgment, your discernment, your seeking after knowledge. That's going to be a part of the entire psyche. When we think of psyche in psychological terms, it's important to understand that that's why psychology is not considered an empirical science, because it's the study of this aspect of human nature, which is really hard to measure. It's not reproducible and it's not repeatable. So it's hard to push it through the scientific method. And I would argue that it doesn't need to go through the scientific method, which is a tool for the tangible, for the body, for materiality. So the psyche is what we're going to call the soul. So that way we can keep the modern connotation of soul at bay. So when we are looking at the conflict, this conflict is going to arise because you have that spirit, that piece that is, you can call it the divine spark, the divine ground, that which comes from the great architect, as we say from in Freemasonry. It's the aspect that is divine. And Freemasonry, and as well as myself, we assert that every human being has a divine spirit, something in them that is of the heavens. Now, how it got there, where it came from, that is up for each individual and each person to really figure out what that truth will be. Freemasonry will not delineate that truth. That is something you must come to your own understanding. So you have this 3-part relationship of body, psyche, and spirit, and they're in conflict. When we look at original sin, I'm going to say that in a very philosophical tense, not in a religious tense, that the original sin is when man fell out of eternity and into time, when man became linear instead of divine. And when man fell out of eternity and into time, there became an inversion. So when we, again, according to Plato, when you reside in the realm of being, which is the realm of forms, and forms is very misleading in modern times because forms means material to us. But think of forms as ideals. When we resided in the form or in the realm of ideals, we were divinely perfect. Everything was in harmony. The higher nature of who we were governed the lower nature. But when we fell out of eternity and into time, it flipped on its head. And the nature of the body started to oversee and become the steward of the nature of the spirit and of the psyche. And that's the conflict that compels us, that drives us to flip things aright. Meaning that when you're sitting there, let's take a mental field trip. Let's all close our eyes and go back to the time, and it might be fairly recent, it might be a long time ago, where you sat there and you had that moment where things all changed, where your perception changed and something you just, first it was quiet, and then it started to nag and nag and nag you more and more and more, especially as you were dismissive of it. Because typically, if you want to look at like the heroes of a thousand faces and Joseph Campbell, that's the call, right? And typically we like to refuse the call. We don't want to answer it. It means a whole lot of work and a lot of trials and tribulations and just discomfort and friction. But you sat there, and in that moment, something changed. Now, I don't know for you if it was a big event that caused that switching inside of you where you realize you were not where you wanted to be. And I'm not talking about, do you have the right house, the car, the clothes? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something deeper, something that is almost incommunicable. That there was something that just you were like, this is not where I want to be. This is not right. This is not the life I'm supposed to live. And for some people, it was very minute and it was gradual, but ultimately it comes down to the fact that it kept nagging us for a change. And that's when you have the misalignment, when your full faculty, your psyche and your body, and of course the divine spark within you, all realize that you're in disharmony with each other. So you're trying to bring yourself from the unreal, which is the illusion. Oftentimes you'll hear, especially in Masonry, talk a lot about the real versus the unreal. And it's something that's big in Platonic philosophy as well. When you look at the illusion, it's not that this whole world is an illusion. It's not so concrete. It's the idea that not everything is as we think it to be. Remember when you learned something and you're like, that is the truth, and then something came along the way down the road and you realized that you were not right at all, and it flipped you upside down and it confused you. That is ultimately what the path of spiritual transformation is trying to do. It's trying to get you to break away from the things that are illusions, things that are not real, things that aren't in your best interest. And again, this can take a lot of different faces and it can take you to a lot of different places, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's where your lower powers, although they're in control and they keep themselves in control if they can, they realize that ultimately they are not the charioteer. They are going to be the ones that need to be bridled back and pulled into stewardship. And your psyche is what's going to make you and me different, right? Our bodily forms, if you believe in the law of correspondence, as above, so below, as above, as within, as without, and vice versa. If you believe in the law of correspondence, which Masonry in its rituals heavily relies on, the idea that everything is a mirror reflection of everything else. That if you believe in that, the body is going to hold the psyche and represent what the psyche is. So if you have a body that is, and this is usually done by choices, right? So there's choices you've made in your life that has changed the way you physically look. And that's because the psyche is controlling the body and the body is controlling the psyche, right? So the body's telling the psyche, you need to do all this stuff so that the powers that belong to the body, the things that are lower natured energies, are going to stay in control. And the more you do that, it's in an inversely proportional relationship. And what I mean by that is, as one increases, those lower nature's powers increase. It diminishes the power and the will of the spirit, the divine spirit, or the divine spark, and the psyche. The psyche is kind of like the vehicle that moves things back and forth. And so Masonry is trying to get us to break out of this idea that everything is as it should be. And that everything, and this is a Hermetic principle, that everything is but a half truth, if that. Think about all the things that you know for certain. And I wonder if you could give me a quality control on that and say, for sure, it's 100% certain, or is there always a little bit of doubt that there might be greater truth out there? Masonry is trying to help us unlock our are blinds that keep us from seeing what is real, which is the forms, which are the things that are good, true, and beautiful. It's not the desire and the passion and the lust. Those are emotions that have been used for the negative aspect instead of the positive aspect. So this is the landscape in which the conflict arises. Now, some people believe in the body-soul dichotomy where body-soul dichotomy where there's only two aspects. And that's fine too, but I would say they only reduce the spirit and the psyche into one side and put the body on the other side. And this would still take the same layout. This would still have the same problem. Ultimately, that whole classic, I don't know, it's not Disney, I think it's in other particular animations, but you have the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and they're fighting for your will. Think of it that way, where you have the divine spark sitting on one side, you have the body sitting on the other side, and you are the psyche, and you have to choose how your psyche is going to express itself. Is it going to express itself through the lower form, or is it going to express itself through the higher form? So this whole experience of being born and brought into this life is to help us. This is the purpose. This is the teleology. This is the end result. The purpose of this existence, and again, whether you believe in one time or multiple, doesn't matter, is to right the misidentification of the real from the unreal. Is to learn what it is that is actually real. And so that you can have the steward be you can have the spirit be the charioteer instead of the body. And we're in this continual consternation and agitation because our whole our tripartite nature knows that it's not in the right alignment. And so many of us choose religions, many of us choose spiritual paths. I would include Masonry in either one of those, depending on how you view it. Like, we all choose something to help us redirect ourselves so that we can invert that upside down understanding of, well, the lower nature should be governing the spirit, which is not, I think that's very Foucault, isn't it? Foucault that believes that that's the body.
Yeah, but the mind imprisons the body.
Yeah, the mind imprisons the body. So it's a little bit different if you follow Michel Foucault, but we don't in Masonry. Masonry truly believes that our whole job is to do this. And this is again in Platonic words, but it's to right the misidentification. It's to help empower the spirit to grow. Now, and that's done through the path of spiritual transformation. So that couches everything into a really nice context, at least I think so. Here is a message from, or a quote rather, from Meister Eckhart. And you'll see a couple quotes throughout because I find him to be very prolific in a lot of his understanding of the metaphysical world. And it says, nature's intent is neither food, nor drink, nor clothing, nor comfort, nor anything else from which the great architect is left out. Now, Meister Eckhart is in the 1500s. He said God. In Freemasonry, we say the great architect. So that's why you'll see the brackets as a replace. Whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, secretly, nature seeks and hunts and tries to ferret out the track in which the great architect may be found. This is why people are drawn to spirituality. Again, whether that's religious, doesn't matter. They're drawn to something higher than themselves. That's why if we go in the opposite, and I'm going to stop here in a couple comments to open the floor for any questions. But that's why when we go the opposite direction and we say there is no purpose, and it is just about, as Foucault says, imprisoning the body, and we have to let the body out and be, very hedonistic. That's why for a lot of people that leads to a very dark, dark place. It tends to make them go rock bottom because it is an absolute reversal of our nature. Our nature is divine. That is ultimately couched in every single person, whether we like them or not, whether we see it or not, it's irrelevant. We are all divine, and our divinity is trying to align itself with the greater divinity of the cosmos. And when we don't allow it, it creates that friction that we experience here in this human existence. All right, I'd like to stop here, see if there's any questions or comments. And if you have any comments, ask, stay on task and not get too crazy with personal story. we can get through the presentation, because as usual, I like to pack it full of tons of stuff. So if you have any questions or comments, this is the time to raise your hand if you're on our Zoom platform. If you're coming in from our other platforms, Brother Patrick will assist you in getting your questions expressed. Are there any questions or comments? Comments are silent? All right. So we proceed forward. So I came into this quote. Now, I've known this quote for a while, and the quote that I knew was, "Many are called, but few are chosen." And it always it's something that bothered me. I liked the quote. But I'm like, well, what's the metric for people being chosen? And then I saw an extended version. And again, like I said, you see Eckhart a little bit, maybe a little too much on this presentation. I'll have to scale it back next month. But I really, really liked how he framed this, because many are called, but because few choose to be chosen, few are chosen. And I love this very humanistic approach, even though it predates humanism, in the fact that it's our choice to be chosen. It's our choice. There is an element of free will, and we can debate at some other point how much free will we have, but it is our free will to be chosen to walk the path of spiritual transformation. That's within our power. For those who sit at home and are just like, the obstacles are too big. Yeah, they're big because there's some problems that need to be rectified and taken care of, and some fell out of our control. But to quote Stranger Things, and not to spoil anything if you haven't caught up on it, is you have to take one step at the time and just take the right step. Doesn't matter how many steps it takes. You just take the right step that's right in front of you, and you just keep going, and you grit your teeth and you move forward. If you want to be chosen, then choose to be chosen. I often think about, like, why is the path of a spiritual occultist hard? Right? Why is that hard? I think that's a good question, because whether you're a Martinist or a Rosicrucian or a Mason or the various others that are out there, like, it's a hard path to walk. So why is it hard? And then I came into some, lower understanding. I think there's probably more to be had. But if you want to be the disciple of the great architect, or disciple of whatever greater power or entity that you believe in, well, you have to be willing to do the things that seem difficult now, because if you're walking the path down the road and there's some really big obstacles, how are you going to ever overcome them? You have to choose to be chosen. That means you have to put the work in. And in Freemasonry, it's no different. Everyone has the potential to be extraordinary. Few choose to be extraordinary. We have a saying in Masonry, and it's not universal, but it is something that I have seen a lot over the years, is that, when we're interviewing people who are interested in becoming a Mason and they've applied and, and they're going through the process, one of the things that you keep in the back of your mind is the person that you're interviewing, could they at some point down the road be the head of the lodge, which we call the master of the lodge? And if not, what can they fix now to help them? Like, ultimately, it's to prepare them so that they can progress spiritually and Masonically through all of the phases that it takes to become a master, because no one becomes a master overnight. And if you can't say yes to that, then you need to help that person, that pre-initiate, if you will, to get to the point where they can. And obviously, like I said, it's not right out of the gate, but you have to help them choose to be chosen. Now, again, everyone has free will. Not everyone will choose to be chosen. In fact, very few are on the grand cosmic scheme of things. So I don't know if we're going to get through, we have about an hour, get through all of the steps. I am going to stop at some point here and we can talk about any questions that you might have, but I'd like to just walk through the steps in general, again, through the Platonic lens of the spiritual transformation. So step one is called life in opinion. And this is doxa, D-O-X-A, doxa. And this is very important because this is where a lot of people sit. And this doesn't mean you're here forever, but we're going to talk pretty extensively, I think, about this particular step. Step two is preparation in darkness 3 is a moral reorientation. One of the things about Freemasonry, and it is something that is well veld, but it is something that is absolutely essential to a Masonic education, is a moral education. And it's not like, what do you think wisdom is, or what do you think the true is? No, like it is literally, you need to learn what different morals and values are so that you can understand what is, in your opinion, the best one. No one's going to sit there and say, this is the best system. You have to come to that understanding. That's where your opinion matters, not whether or not you like a particular system or not. I was actually just debating with a brother yesterday. I won't get into the specifics, but we were debating about a current event. And I had said, that this one person, this happened many, I think many years ago. This person's now in jail. I was like, that person's immoral. And the brother was like, well, why are they immoral? Why is it not considered unethical? And, we were talking about this whole conversation. And the thing that kept being repeated was, well, words matter. Words matter. We could say that what this person did was unethical, but were they immoral? And I was like, oh man, words do matter. And understanding a moral education, I have to say, and much to my sadness, I could not articulate my point of why I thought this individual is immoral. Even though now he's in jail, it's like, well, yeah, he's in jail for being unethical, but was he in jail for being immoral? And that's what it's like to fight with an occultist on the other side, is like, you're always challenged to have to articulate your words in a more higher level than just like, well, the justice system put him in jail, so therefore he's bad guy. And I realized there's a gap in my understanding, and I have to go back and understand why a person is what I say he is, because I don't know how to defend it. So I don't know what I'm talking about. So why is my mouth open? So it was a really interesting place to be, even after all these years in Masonry, constantly reorienting myself and understanding what morality is. Step 4, because we're talking about Plato and his Republic, is recognition of the cave. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. If you're not familiar with the allegory of the cave, don't worry about it. If we get to that step, I will explain briefly what it's about. Discipline of the mind. This is really probably one of the hardest things, because we live in such a time where everything is thrown against us to not discipline our mind. It is to, have the lights and the smells and all the senses just being accosted at all times. To bring in some anecdotal evidence of this, I have a young daughter, and there's 2 movies she cannot watch because they make her the biggest grump in the world. And I was talking actually with Brother Benjamin, who has some background in early education, and we were talking, and I was like, I don't know why she can't, like, she just turns into this grump. It's crazy. And he goes, oh, well, that would make sense, because there was a lot of lights, there was a lot of sounds, there was just a lot of motion, and it was just too much. And she's almost 5, and she was just having a really hard time with that. And I've really watched the movie since, the various movies, to see what movies impact her. And I was like, yeah, the newer movies are meant to undiscipline our mind, to keep our mind constantly in a state of fray. And a part of spiritual transformation is to discipline our mind. Eros redirected. This is step 6. We're going to talk a lot about Eros and define that. In fact, the first picture I had on the slide, at the very beginning, looking forward, was of Eros, the god of love, and a type of love, because for those who aren't aware, in ancient Greek philosophy, there are different types of love. We'll talk about Eros redirected. It's really important, again, because we're looking at that realignment of who we are. Probably one of the most famous things Plato is known for is going to be the recollection of forms. And again, put ideals instead of forms, if that will help you. That's step 7. Mastery of self. This is where, all the yogis sit, where they're just, all the saints, all those people that are just having mastery of self. Looking at that, and what does that look like? How does that entail? Because it is very nuanced. It's not just, self-mortification and self-nodding. It's more than that. It's very nuanced. We'll talk more about what that nuance is. Step 9 is the orientation of the good. And I use the word the good in here because that is the highest ideal in the realm of being, which is the realm of forms in Plato, in his laying out of cosmology. And you can read in his mid to the late dialogues, you can see a real movement of trying to explain the metaphysics of human existence. If you're ever interested in reading Plato, I highly recommend this Mid to Late Dialogues that would talk more about that orientation of the good. And then the temple ideal. In Masonry, we call the temple not made with hands. The temple ideal. And there's another step which we'll talk about here at the end, whether we get through all the slides or not. I'm going to talk about the first two steps, and then I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions or comments. So prepare yourself if they're there to get ready to ask them. So step one, we're looking at life and opinion. So psyche is going to be feminine in Platonic philosophy. It's feminine. So you'll see that psyche is in the red robe here, and then you have reason is going to be in blue, right? And this is a masculine feminine interaction. And I know in recent times, modernity doesn't like the distinction of masculine and feminine. However, and maybe unfortunately, depending on how you feel, occultism doesn't care. It doesn't care if you like masculine or feminine. It is what it is. That there are aspects that are masculine and aspects that are feminine. And when you bring them together, when you have that dialectic of female coming together, you get that neutral androgynine that comes together to create something new. And that's ultimately, if you're into alchemy, it's the alchemical marriage, the wedding of the red king, white queen, and bringing them together to make this, again, this conflict right itself. So in step one, life and opinion, this doxa, this is where we were all at some point, or maybe we are at this point, where you have desire, again, which is the man in the blue toga, that is going to be, excuse me, it's the woman in the red toga, who governs reason and enchants reason to do all sorts of crazy things, which those who are removed from this particular step are like, that's wild. I don't know why you would do that. And you see that psyche is going to live by habit. The difference between habit and ritual, which is very important, is that ritual is habit with sacred purpose. So you do things over and over again, but there is a sacred purpose to it. There is an end that is to commune, perhaps in spiritual ecstasy, with the great architect, with the divine. But psyche has removed this out because the body has told psyche to move this out, and it's just habit. It's just doing stuff because that's what you do. Think about the habits you have in your day. Is it the way you dry yourself off? Is it more, caustic? Is it something that hurts your health or your relationships that you do? Yeah, that's the body trying to keep in control, and psyche is helping. So appetite. Appetite does not necessarily have to be physical food. It could be the consuming of bad things in general. It can be toxic relationships. It could be bad media on both sides. It can be anything that is going to make you gluttonous, right? It's going to have you, if I can go into the 7 deadly sins and I can go into Dante's Inferno and we can talk about gluttony, it's taking those things, it's consuming things that are just not good for the spirit. And you know what they are. You've experienced, everyone here has done something that violates the appetite of the spirit, and it has satiated the appetite of the body. And we know how it feels. You feel like crap afterwards, and you try to justify it. Again, there's the desire trying to tell reason that it's okay. And that's the life and opinion. You're living this doxa where you think you know everything, but the problem is the knowledge you have isn't real knowledge. It is knowledge of the illusion, which is unreal. So you are confusing truth with consensus, and that consensus can be a mob mentality, or that consensus can be a small tribal mentality. You have two of your closest friends all believe the same thing, and none of you have tried to excavate the first principles of what you believe in to see if they're even real. And so, or it's utility, it's something that just works. It's just what works. And Plato, if you want to look at more about opinion, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a Mason, is the divided line. He talks a lot about moving yourself or and the realm of being. And it's moving yourself out of opinion. It's realizing that everything is that you think is a mistake. And it's not necessarily a mistake because you've wrong information, though that is a part of it. It could be a mistake because you don't know why you believe in it. Just an example of what I did yesterday when I was like, that person's immoral. And then I was like, yeah, I can't defend my point at all. And I'm glad that brother's not here because I hate eating crow, but I will own it. I couldn't tell you why I said it was a knee-jerk reaction, which is human. It's bodily. Everyone does that, but it's not right. And so, life and opinion, think about all the things you believe in and ask yourself, what is it that you truly know? Not because you have conviction, but because you have knowledge. And how much of it is actually just belief? Even science, which a lot of you know I love science, we believe in it. I don't know if the earth is flat or round. I just know what they taught me. And I guess I could sit down and look at the mathematics. I don't know how high it goes up. I have some level of understanding of math, but I love talking to people who are flat earthers because I want to really understand why they think the world is flat. But if they were to ask me why it was round, I would just tell you because that's what they taught me in school. That is not an opinion. That is belief. And if I'm going to die on that sword, I better know what I'm talking about. So the first step is recognizing that you live in ignorance in its various shades. That ignorance is the absence of true knowledge. And true knowledge is defined by the real, understanding the reality as it is. And we all have the shared reality. There's not people with different realities, like your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. That's crap. Truth is truth. You have your perception of it, and I have my perception, and they may not agree, and that's fine. But truth is truth. I haven't brought this up in a while, and I will bring it up just because I haven't brought it up in a while, and I do love this parable. It's the 10 blind men and the elephant. They're filling out the various elephant, and they're talking, one's touching the tusk, and one has the ear, and one's touching the side and the feet and all that. And then they're asked to describe the elephant. And of course, they describe the part of the elephant that they were able to touch with their hands. And there was this big uproar in the town because, they were all calling each other liars because, they knew the truth because of what they experienced. And they went to the local wise men, and I'm totally paraphrasing this parable. And he says, you're all right and you're all wrong. Because we all have aspects that can be right. And sometimes we may be completely wrong. But the thing is to understand is that we always have something to learn in every aspect. No matter if you're an expert in your field, there is always something to learn. I've been in Masonry for a long time, and I still am learning about Masonry. It is very vast. So we have to really excavate our depth of understanding so that we can uncover the ignorance that truly resides there. We'll go through one more slide, and then we'll stop and see if there's any questions or comments. So step 2, encounter with ignorance. So once we're living in this life of opinion, we have to realize, again, there's that call that something isn't right. There's a conflict, that agitation that has been inside of us that's been festering and maybe hasn't caught our attention yet is now coming to the front. So the false knowledge, the unreal, must die before the real knowledge begins. You must unlearn what you know to learn something new. Now, the example I take on this is religion. A lot of people have experience with organized religions, and they get really upset because they find out perhaps that their religion, there is contradictions in their religion. And so they end up leaving because they're really mad because they tend to be more literal in their interpretation of their religion, and they get really, really mad. And then they find out, 20, 40, 60 years later that the religion wasn't necessarily wrong. It's the way it was interpreted and the way that they came to that understanding. And perhaps they end up dying in the religion that they were raised in. Perhaps they go to a religion that's similar but not the same. But ultimately, they realize that there is, even with stuff that we know for certain, there is always a level that we have to commit at, where we can say, I am this belief system, whether it's religious, political, doesn't matter. I am this belief system because I know it not to be true with a capital T. I know it to be effective in trying to spiritually transform myself. And that allows for the dialogue that exposes contradiction. So in Masonry, and this is where Universal Co-Masonry is a bit more unique than most Masonic obediences, is we allow the discussion of politics and religion in our lodges. To put in a caveat, that is not to say we talk about political and current events, meaning we don't sit there and say, oh, what happened in this state with this problem is right or wrong. We don't talk about that. We talk about the various aspects of religion. You know, like recently we were just talking about the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita and looking at the merits of that particular religious text in relationship to Freemasonry. You know, and there is a there's a conflict in the Western mind because it's coming out of a society that believes in a caste system. And it is a very rigid caste system, and though it has lessened in the years, it's still very rigid. And so there's a dialogue there to discuss the merits of whether or not human beings thrive or not in a caste system, and whether or not it's good for the spirit, a tripartite experience. Like, that's the type of things we talk about. We don't talk about people and places. We talk about ideas. Again, a lot of people will talk at the current event level, which is the realm of becoming. Masons try to talk in Universal Co-Masonry, we try to talk about in the realm of being, the things that are real. Like, what is the best form of governance in a lodge? Is it democracy? Is it oligarchy? Is it, democracy? Whatever it is, like, what is the best type of government? And you can only have your knowledge, like I had last night, is when someone is in contradiction to you and says, well, why do you believe that? What's your reason? And it's not to be defensive. It's not like they're trying to get you and to win. It's not about winning. It's about understanding the depth of your own false knowledge and going back and trying to fix it. And ultimately, when you uncover the fact that you may not know everything, there's a little bit of spiritual and intellectual humility that comes with it. Your confidence fails. Because why would you be confident about something that's not necessarily true? And confidence is defined by putting trust in a thing. So you have confidence that gravity will work. If you jump out of an airplane, you're not going to go up or stay where you're at. You're going to fall down. That's confidence. But when you are discussing something and you're not able to support that thought, the confidence collapses because it should. Because confidence comes with true knowledge, not with false knowledge. So dialogue is extremely important. So the psyche is going to realizes it, but doesn't know what this. Okay, that's a rough sentence. I should have rewrote that. The psyche doesn't realize that it assumed that it knew. Like, when I told this other brother, like, yeah, that person's immoral, like, I didn't realize that I just assumed that. Like, I felt like I knew. And then when he was like, well, how is that different from just, like, I'd agree he's unethical, but how is that immoral? And I was like, oh man, I didn't even realize that I was making all of these assumptions. And if I didn't realize it about this, which is a minor discussion point, what is it about the major things that I don't know? So that doubt is important, because that doubt is helping you dig out all of the things that are false and base to help it make space for the things that are real. All right, so I'd like to stop here and see if there's any comments or questions. And please keep it on topic, just so that we can stay on, the course. If it is off topic, I'll redirect you to the end of the presentation. All right, Eva, your hand is raised.
Thank you. I was interested in one of the last, can you hear me?
Yeah, my mic's low. I'm going to turn it up here. Brother Patrick, someone's going to turn my mic up. Just 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear it. It's just really soft, so I'm going to have Brother Patrick here.
Okay.
Turn my volume up. I mean, I guess I could have done that. I do know where that button is. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, Ava, let's try that again. Did I lose you, Ava? There you are. There you are.
I accidentally muted myself. You can hear me better now?
All right, you and I don't make one. It's fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was interested in one of the last things you said, where you said that I resonated in the part where you said that discussing current events, that current events is what is becoming, and I could see sort of the value of talking about ideas of, like, what is before the becoming, like the kind of ideas in the Platonic space. I mean, I can think of a sort of Kabbalistic comparison for that, which I won't go into right now. But when you then said that talking about ideas instead of events is the real, I mean, I get that sort of in the Platonic sense, but isn't events that happen and affect actual people in their lived lives instead of just hypotheticals and theory, isn't that more real? And isn't it kind of like blocking things out to not discuss that, to only talk about the hypotheticals?
It's a great question. I will tell you, like, with Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin and the people that I work with, we talk about current events all the time because we're good friends, at least from my side. I mean, they haven't told me otherwise. We talk about current events all the time, and we, get into the nitty-gritty of it. But like in Lodge, in Universal Co-Masonry, we have people of every religious and political stance you can think of. And the reason why that works is because we're not sitting there saying, this president is good or that president is bad or, this, religious figure is awesome. Like we're not being nitpicky. Now, the thing is by talking about, and I liked what you said, these current events are in the realm of becoming, talking about the ideals that are behind all this allows us to understand how to be better in our conversations with other people. It helps build the bridges because it does impact people. And it's real to the extent that it happened and people are impacted to it. But like, will I lose my mind over the fact that whatever the other side is, wins or does something like, no. However, I will be mindful in why they came to that discussion. Like you can take communism. You can read the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels and say, okay, well, here are the merits. Like if you look at the ideology of it, like it looks pretty great. But if you look at the practice of it, obviously that's real to the people who've experienced it. But why does it fail? And so looking at the ideals allows to better educate our passions and transform them into emotions. And again, I use passions as a word for co-suffering. When you have an emotion that is so awful to experience, and it can even be love, it doesn't have to be a negative one like hate, but it causes so much harm within you, you don't react well to the other side. So when you're talking about what's behind all of these current events, the ideals that are behind these current events, it allows you to see what the other people value who you may not agree with and the ideals behind them and their ideas. There's a great book, I've mentioned it before, it's The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And he talks about why good people are on both sides. In this case, it's a political book. But I loved it because it talked about like there is good people on all sides. Whether I agree with what their actual stance is irrelevant. But understanding the ideals behind them, why these current events are happening, allows me to love that person as a human just as much as if they were on my side. And that's why Masonry shoots for the highest, because it takes the sting out of the current events. And it's not that we don't feel things like, man, like something is really hard to take in, but it allows us to humanize the other side that is at times being dehumanized by one side or the other. And really, there's not one side that's more right than the other in the ideals in which they're coming from. Maybe their practice is off and maybe you don't agree with that, but that's why we talk about the ideals. The current events, you can talk about it with your brothers that you feel comfortable talking it to, but in Lodge, that's not the place for it because you're getting into the specifics and because people have such an emotional attachment to a particular event that it doesn't allow for harmony to reign. But if you're talking about like communism or you're talking about, like I was saying, the Mahabharata, like you're talking about a general theme that a lot of people, they may not like communism or they may love it and it's up to them. They're not as impassioned. So it allows for a dialogue. So there is a nuance to it. So it's a great question. It's not that we're like, current events, who cares? No, I would follow that Masonry is just like Plato or Socrates through Plato, that the best type of governance organization is a philosopher king. It is someone who knows how to rightly govern. And if you can't talk to the person next to you and understand their side and the ideals that they're coming from, then how can you govern them well? Because you can't see them for what they are. So great question. But there is a variation on what is real. Yes, it impacts people, but it is not they are not defined by that one incident. They're not defined by that one emotion. There's so many other things that define them. So that was a wonderful question. Brother Patrick, is there anything on the other? Yeah.
There is.
Go ahead.
So there's a few questions on YouTube. First up from Andrew Koronek. How do we know when we are in alignment with our divine nature?
That's a great question. How do we know if we're in alignment is with our nature? I heard it said somewhere many years ago, and it always sat with me. So there's the synchronicities. Synchronicities are those events where you're like, I have no idea why that happened, but it happened and it was like for the benefit of all. On a very low level, you can say it's like, oh, I was supposed to call my mom and I don't know why I felt like I called my mom and I called her and she needed my help. Like that's a really low level. There's a lot of other levels that are very synchronistic. And I heard someone say one time that the more in line you are with the universe and your nature, the more synchronicities happen. And when we start to look for things that are like, you would normally just overlook because you're so in the zone of just living this life and getting through, survival checklist, that you would miss it. But the more you start to see synchronicities, the more you start to line yourself with the universe, it's a 22, like, or as we say in science, it's a coupled event. One leads to the other. And that's how you know. And you can feel it within yourself, even though like the obstacles are sometimes enormous, there is a sense of relief of getting them fixed. It's like maybe you have that person that's just like ultra toxic. Maybe you're that person that's ultra toxic and you fix it. Like either you cut that person out or you changed whatever it was that was making you toxic to others. And there is just a sense of just a profound contentment. That's another way that you can tell. When you're doing things and they don't feel right, then you're wrong and you should analyze what it is that you're doing and try to fix it. And you may fix it wrongly and have to try to fix it again and again, but eventually, as I think it was Benjamin Franklin saying, you figure out how to do it all wrong before you figure out how to do it right. So excellent question. Is there another one?
Yes. Mark David Vinzenz asks, what role does ritual play in transforming knowledge into lived wisdom rather than intellectual understanding alone?
Ritual is myth and drama to put you through a test. It's like, think of this as dreaming. So at night when you start to dream, your body is paralyzed so that you can reenact things to help with your survival. For example, let's say you have a recurring dream where you're being chased after someone, or someone's chasing after you, I should say. And it's the same dream over and over, but every time you're closer and closer to the phone, to call for help. Your body is practicing in case of an emergency. For some reason, you don't feel safe in your environment, and so you're dreaming a way out of it. And so you practice it over and over and over until you get to the phone and you get there before harm gets you first. And you've learned how to do it. Masonry and ritual is that. You constantly are practicing the values and virtues that are of the spiritual realm so that it will teach you how to govern the lower realm. And that becomes lived wisdom because you are practicing over and over. There's times when I used to work in education, I'd get so frustrated because I was like, these people aren't playing the game of like how to work together. And I was like, yeah, well, they don't know the rules. Because in Masonry, if someone has a problem with me or I have a problem with them, we go and we solve it hopefully amicably and say, hey, so-and-so, I had a big problem with what you said, or it really affected me this way, and we talk it out and we resolve it and we're done with it. But in education, it was a bunch of backbiting and stabbing and all that stuff. And I was like, this is wild. And I had to realize that they didn't know the rules. And I had been practicing these rules over and over. And so what I chose to do was to emulate what I was taught in Masonry, which is when I had a problem, as much as it was horrifying to go do it in the outside world, and show them that, like, look, by talking it out, it's uncomfortable in the moment, but now we have established that either we have just a working relationship because we don't like each other and we can just accept that fact, or we actually overcame that and we can be more than just civil to each other. We can actually have a professional relationship that is beneficial. And so learning how to do ritual over and over trains the body, trains the psyche to help be in alignment so that the spirit can generate outward. Many times when I've been frustrated with an individual, I keep telling myself, just because I can't see their virtue doesn't mean it doesn't exist. They're the divine spark. And it allows me to like separate from that. And it allows me to give them space to be human. And hopefully they would do the same thing for me. So ritual gives you a lot of practical ways to exist in a world that doesn't necessarily follow the rules that you learn in Masonry. But it allows you to exist without being sacrificed in a world that's very animalistic at times. So ritual is paramount to that. Especially because you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for a higher purpose, to align yourself with the divine. And again, it goes back to the more you align yourself to the divine, things don't get easier, they get harder, but things that were once hard are easy to maneuver because you've already gone through it and you've already learned how to process in the right way. You're establishing a new medium, and then living that. And ritual teaches you that through discipline. One more?
There's a couple more, but they're general questions about Freemasonry and Universal Co-Masonry.
Excuse me. Let's save that to the end.
Okay.
So that way we can carry on. Check my time here. All right. Moving forward. And I love the questions. Keep them coming. Oh, and in this, sorry, ooh, I'm just hitting all sorts of buttons. So in this picture, you have Plato and Aristotle in the middle. Plato's on the left, Aristotle's on the right. And I love it because you have Plato pointing upward and Aristotle's pointing downward. And I believe it's the Timaeus, and it's not, what is Aristotle holding? What book? It has evaded my head. Timaeus and something else, but they're holding books that are very specific to their philosophical writings, and it is as above, so below. But Aristotle's talking about, by having his hand down, that we have to look to the ground to figure out the false knowledge, and Plato is saying, and we have to replace it with the real knowledge. Just so you want to know a little bit about that artwork. So ethics precedes metaphysics. Now, Plato saw ethics as we see morality today, so keep that in mind. It has since flipped to mean different things in modern times. But when we look at the moral reorientation, this goes back to the things that we've been talking about this last hour, which is understanding. It's like when you understand, like, oh, when you're a kid, you're like, I'm just helping, I'm just helping, I'm just helping. Sometimes when you help, it becomes enabling, right? And then you realize that there's a difference between the two. So you have a reorientation that actually the right thing to do isn't to, help them in whatever way they're asking. It's actually to let them struggle. And so you reorient your mind to accept that, because in reality, that is better for that person than you assisting them in whatever way they're asking. So the psyche begins to sense that truth isn't based off of your perception. This is what I was saying earlier, like, your truth is your truth. Cannot stand that phrase because it hijacks truth. Like, if you put, the classic symbol of circumpunct, where you have a circle with a point in it and you have the two tropics on either side, and you look at that point, like, that's truth. And to sit there and say, well, your truth is your truth, is to say that there's multiple truths. And that's not possible. This universe would fall apart if there wasn't a shared reality amongst all of us. Understanding that truth is not subjective. Subjective means that you own it. That it's objective, it's owned by many, means that you can start realigning yourself towards the objective, to the realm of ideals, and that certain things are non-negotiable. Have you ever met someone that they're just, man, they are just the most virtuous person, and he or she is like, they will not bend the knee on whatever it is that most people ask them to do, and they're just so virtuous. And there comes a point in the spiritual transformation where you're not willing to bend the knees for certain things. It's like, yeah, I cannot go where you're asking me to go. It is going back into the realm of ignorance. I just cannot do it, and I have to live for it. The trick here isn't, it goes, point one and point two kind of dovetail off of each other. Justice, beauty, and goodness, those aren't what you think they are. There is their own essence. In the realm of forms, as Plato defines it, all of these have their own specific essence. And in Masonry, we use ritual to, I think it was David's point, we use ritual to try to penetrate that realm, to access it, to get into those moments and touch that essence and to understand it. If you say, well, what is beauty? Well, you need to understand what the form of beauty represents. Anything that's a ness, like goodness, that is the act of being good. Well, what does it mean to be good? One person, what is it? One person's freedom fighter is another person's...
One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter.
Now, like, that's perception. Like, there comes a point where there's reality to it, and taking ourselves out of it and saying, that psyche is saying, well, it's all about me, 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 which in our hyper-individualized society is a tough ride, because, don't tread on us. We are individuals. You can't tell me what to do. Though there is value and virtue in that, I don't disagree with that. There is a point when it is used as a wrong tool. There are things higher than ourselves, such as the realm of forms, if you believe in that type of phrasing, that we have to bend the knee for. Like, I've heard it before with justice. Like, I will never tell you, I would never take your right away to say whatever it is you want, but I will spend the rest of my life fighting what it is you say. If I don't agree with someone, I'm not going to silence them because they say something I don't agree with. And it could be that they're the most ignorant person on the planet, not even by my, like, the, metric of the universe. That's irrelevant. They still have the right to speak. But I have to understand what justice, beauty, and goodness are at not a subjective level. And here I love this image where you see Psyche is being educated by reason, that it's starting to use, and this book isn't necessarily like facts, like, oh, knowing that gravity is this on the moon versus gravity, like, that's not going to spiritually liberate you, although it is going to help you. Concrete facts have its place, but spiritual learning is what's going to educate desire. One of the things, especially in like the Eightfold Path and a lot of the Eastern teachings, and you'll even see it in Masonic teachings, is that desire is, you have to have desirelessness. You have to lack desire in order to transform. It's important to understand what that means. Like, desire can be educated, it can be disciplined, it can be of the spirit. But if you have desire that resides with the body, then you're not going to get to where you want. You have to educate it. Go pick up a book and read something that's not on the same side as your thoughts. Read something that's opposite, and read a book to the end, even if they say something or if they're dry as dirt, like, still finish it. You're going to be better for it. And don't just read it just to say you read it. Like, take the time to study it. And the only thing that you're in danger of is being more educated. And maybe it's being more educated in the things that you're like, yeah, I don't think that's a great thing. You will be able to bring yourself into discipline. What is your moral platform? What is it that you believe in? Start there and start to see how you can educate yourself and say, well, what did Aquinas say, and what did the Easterns say, and what does modernity say, and what do all these different philosophical schools say? Because that whole corpus of knowledge is far greater than your opinion. And from that, you can say, all right, I've read a lot, not all of it, but I've read a lot, and I feel like this part here makes sense. And that is where I'm going to sit and have my actions. And so you're going to have a place where you're ready for the transcendent. You're ready for that which is beyond the material, which is metaphysical. I'm going to do one more slide and stop for questions. Recognition of the cave. So the allegory of the cave is one of the most famous stories and myths that Plato uses in his dialogues. It's out of the Republic. And ultimately, it's coming out of total ignorance. I recently read something that said that, what was it? That vice is not aware of virtue, but virtue is aware of vice. And the cave really embodies that. When you are sitting in the cave and you have, there's a rock behind you so you can't see. And in front of you, you see these shapes, and it's, people holding up little puppets, if you will, and it's their shadows that are being casted on by a lesser light on the wall. And you're like, oh, that's the truth, right? Because that's all you know. That's the truth. And then someone comes from behind you and shows you the way out into the real sun. And you see that behind you, that wasn't real. That was an illusion. That those weren't actually those weren't actual figures. Those were shadows of figures. That is the liberation of coming from ignorance into knowledge, from vice into virtue. Plato defined vice as the lack of knowledge. In Masonry, you can have different definitions. It just depends on how you approach it. But ultimately, I would say that Masonry is more in line with that Platonic ideal, that that ignorance is going to be the vice, and that virtue is going to be the knowledge of it. But this liberation, the interesting thing, because when I first learned about the allegory of the cave many years ago, I was like, hey, that's great. You learned that the shadows on the wall are wrong. Not wrong, but they're not the real ones. And you come out into this light, and then everything's, you're just illuminated. Some would even say enlightened. But it came into a better understanding that, oftentimes walking into the full sun, which is represents the spiritual sun, it is blinding and it is painful. Imagine when you've been sitting in the dark room for a long time and you go outside on a bright sunny day, and how long it takes for your eyes to adjust, and you may even be watering. It's very uncomfortable. That's spiritual realization, and it's painful. that liberation isn't meant to be pleasant. It's disruptive. And that's why a lot of people don't want to walk this path, because it's uncomfortable. And especially in this era where everything's about comfort. I mean, the advent of Crocs says that right there. It's like everything is supposed to be comfortable, but it's not. Coming out of that cave into that spiritual sun is it's painful, and it jars you on every level, and it's just so much. And when you start to digest that spiritual sun interaction, you start to see how society isn't what it says it is. And it's going to be constructed in a way that's manipulative. Now, manipulation, some people will argue like, oh, it's for the better. If you look at different fascist or communist regimes, they were like, nah, this is for the better of society. And maybe they even really believe that. Who knows? But it is meant to manipulate people to behave a certain way. And if you look at a lot of Plato's mid to late dialogues, he talks, well, even his early dialogues, he talks a lot about how you should have the best government that will manipulate people to do the right thing. So manipulation is a pejorative now, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And when we look at it and we see that the society is more than what we have come to know it to be, because it's a shadow on the wall, we are no longer manipulated by it. And that we have an education that converts us. Like, I can sit in any room with anybody and I can fundamentally disagree with them, but I can converse with them like, I'm one of them, like, because I can see their point of view, and I can see, hopefully I try to, and I try to understand them as human beings and not play the game of the pendulum that just swings so drastically back and forth. A Mason, hopefully, as they recognize that they're in the cave, and we're in micro caves all the time. So all of you who may be sitting there being like, I'm sitting pretty, I'm out of the cave, I see things as they are. Like, there's micro caves everywhere. And you're probably sitting in the cave right now if you're saying that. So when you look at it as a Mason, and we're on this pendulum, the point of the Mason is you can never get off the pendulum, but you can climb up the string. And you're less and less swayed back and forth the higher you go up. And that education helps you see things from a bird's eye view and give people more context and space to be human. And you are going to want to resist this. There are lots of things that you're like, nope, I won't believe that. I just don't want to. And you're going to resist it. It's not for your good, but it's human. And you have this knee-jerk reaction where you want to resist it. And I don't know if I should tell you not to resist it, but it is something to be anticipated, because when you have perceived something a certain way for a period of time, it's very uncomfortable to not see it that way anymore. And we have to be careful, because there's always the gravity of the cave is enormous. Think about the gravity of Saturn or Jupiter, one of the big giant planets trying to pull on you. That's the cave. It's trying to pull you back into ignorance. And it's true, you can never unlearn a thing, but you can definitely have willful blindness. And you could go back into the cave and be like, I choose to see the shadows on the wall as reality. And that's a choice, even though the entire time you know they're not real. You have to resist the gravity of the cave. But you have to not fight the fact that truth exists and it's calling you to understand it. All right, I'd like to stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Go ahead.
Just the general ones from earlier.
We'll go to Ava.
Thank you again. So you said that, part of one of the bullet points was, that it's a bad idea to say that, that there's multiple truths, that truth is subjective, that truth should be objective for things to not fall apart. But of course, also a pillar of Masonry is not insisting on any religious idea, like letting everybody have their own way to interpret the great architect and everything that comes with that. And by giving that freedom of metaphysical thought, you are at a very fundamental, again, metaphysical level, allowing some degree of multiple truths. So when insisting on objective truth also insists on, a firm dogma?
No, that's the paradox of it. It's a great question. It's a paradox of it. No, because, you can sit there and say, we believe in a great architect, right? And that is a requirement to become a member of Universal Co-Masonry. Not all Masonic obediences, but Universal Co-Masonry. But the details of it is like, okay, well, you think, it's more like Krishna, and maybe it's more like this, this God or that God, like, or maybe it's something that no one's even heard of, like whatever. That allows for you to have a perception, but understanding that, look, there's something greater than myself, and you can call it a being, a person, or a principle, a power, or energy, whatever, that there's something higher than myself is not saying that, well, your truth is equal to my truth. We can have an opinion that is equal to each other, that we're both entitled to our opinions. But, someone who is more informed because they've done an enormous amount of study, more than I have, metaphysical study, not just factual study, is going to have a stronger evidence for a particular viewpoint. However, Masonry is not going to say, well, that brother's more right. Everyone's entitled to the perception, but no one owns the truth. And that's because, again, we're all like the 10 blind men trying to fill the elephant of truth. We have aspects that are right, perhaps, but we're still inevitably wrong. So it is a paradox within itself. So no, there's no established like dogma, like you have to have this. I will say we do have landmarks. Like if you don't believe in the great architect in some form, whether again it's a person or an entity or an energy is irrelevant, then our rituals don't mean nothing to you. We're not telling you you're wrong for not believing in something after, death or something higher than yourself. We're just saying that this isn't the place for you because the rituals won't mean anything to you. So no, there's no hard and fixed dogma in that way. Patrick.
So Mark David Vinzenz asks, how can initiatic schools like Masonry move from the margins of society to shaping its moral and spiritual center? How can individual transformation lead to the transformation of the world?
Got someone who's a big dreamer. I like it. I like it. Freemasonry and the mystery schools will always be on the sides and periphery of society. It's never meant to be the main one. It's not meant for everyone. Again, it's that quote that we saw at the very beginning that, few are chosen because few choose to be chosen. And not a lot of people want this. This is not something they're looking for. A lot of people deny the call of the hero in his journey. They don't want to leave what's comfortable. They're perfectly content. I remember a story of a woman who was talking to her mother who was on her deathbed, and they started talking, this person is very metaphysical, so she started talking to her mom about, life after death and all this stuff. And the mom stopped her and said, look, I'm about to die. I don't want to know about anything true, or not true, but something new. I want to just believe what I believe and just be done with it. And that was it. She didn't want to learn. She never asked her daughter anything. And there's people like that. So you'll never see Masonry in the cult schools as mainstream. How you get for the greatest impact by creating a society that is something, utopia, I mean, it's nowhere, but like something that is utopian in nature, is you create people who believe in ideals, that believe in the highest. And sure, you can sit there and say, well, there's tyranny and all that, but that's not the point. The point is to create a future that has yet to been lived by having people who have a moral compass that are trying to do right by what they understand truth to be. And that's how you do it. And it is a slow process. That's why I like to think reincarnation is good to go, because it's going to take lots of lives. I don't think we can do it in one shot, but I mean, who knows if you can do it in one shot or not. Any other questions? Before I go to Brother Glenn?
Not from the platforms.
Okay, we'll go to Brother Glenn, and then we'll go to Chalet. Hi, Brother Glenn.
You won't unmute.
Oh, we can hear you just fine. So
it
you're
worked. Okay. My thoughts are because the question of ritual and what it means. Because my mind goes back to a guy named Mircea Eliade. He spoke of rituals and experiences of coming of age and a lot of things. He was Joseph Campbell's professor. And the idea that the old adage, through names and images, our powers awakened and reawakened. And ritual itself is a play or a set of symbols that are acted out. And the reason that a mystery is left to them is so those symbols can sink into the subconscious mind and be able to pull a truth from it. one in which words don't work. You can pick up a book and read the ritual, but if you go into the ritual blind and allow the psyche to experience it, and then apply thought after the experience, you can actually get somewhere. But the important aspect to me is the contemplative. Some guy some years ago said the unexamined life was not worth living, which is why in a lot of occult circles we have a mirror on our altar. Because the greatest symbol that we need to work with is what we see in that mirror. And through self-reflection, self-examination, we can discover or discern our own code of ethics. When our code of ethics comes from within, it's divinely inspired. If your code of ethics comes from this list on the wall, you still need some more work. But to me, the idea of self-examination is paramount. And I'm preaching, I'm sorry. At any rate, yeah.
Well, Brother Glenn, I think you make some excellent points. So I appreciate you sharing that. When you do ritual, it taps into a part of you that was previously untapped, if you've never experienced it before, especially if you're more cognitive about what's going on. Not so much like the specifics, but like that you're undergoing a ritual. Like you tend to be a lot more receptive. Shali or Shaylee, I'm saying it wrong.
It's Shaylee.
Shaylee.
So, yes, ma'am. So I was going back to what we were talking about, like dogmas and stuff. I just like in the natural world, everything expands, and so I think there's like a point where the ingrained like belief systems that people accumulate like during generations, or just really has just been ingrained however they grown up, and it's hard for them to change their brain after a certain age, is that everything expands. So to put a concrete traditional or even like religious, because religious is like religiously, and traditional is like all the time, it leaves no room for expansion. Like, so I believe that those are good landmarks to have, but to always leave room and to not to have anything so concrete to where it can't be wrong. Because in just the like natural world and everything else, like we expand. That's, I mean, is that not right?
Well, Shelley, it's not whether or not I think you're right or wrong. I do think there is an element of what you're saying of you have to have some plasticity or some immutability with what you believe. Because if you are so like, imagine when you're debating with someone, if you debate with people about a particular topic and they are just unyielding and you're like, this is wild. Like, I'm trying to have a conversation and you're just like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Like, that's a rough place to be because there's really no conversation and you're not really interacting on a way that's, as we say in Masonry, on the level. So that's why when you go in a conversation and you have a little bit of plasticity with your beliefs, it's not that you don't believe anything, it's that the spiritual humility creates that plasticity where you're like, I can learn something, even if it's like, I think that's wrong, that point, and I've learned that is not a point I would use, like there's something always that you can use. And having that spiritual and intellectual humility creates that plasticity where it doesn't dissolve what you believe, like you don't stand for anything. Like, no, I have principles, but I am willing to hear the other side because I may learn something that will better inform my principles or realign my principles to a better metric. So I think there's definitely a plasticity that is involved with it. It is a razor point edge though. Like you don't want to just stand for nothing. Like whatever someone says is fine. So great point. Paulo. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for your words. And I tried to ask you a question. What do you think about so many people living in a planet Earth, so many spirits, and we lost so many biodiversity, about the balance between the humans beings living in a planet at the moment and the loss of biodiversity in the planet Earth as well. What do you think about that kind of?
Paolo, I am not sure I understand your question. Can you rephrase it for me, please?
Sorry, I'm a
That's
little
okay.
bit.
I know you're coming, I think, from Spain, so I know you're pretty tired.
Yes. I try to ask you, what do you think about we have so much people living in the planet Earth at the moment. We don't have our time scale, so many people living in the planet Earth, so many spirits, so many humans living. And we, at that time scale, we don't have so much loss of biodiversity. You understand? That is a difference balance between a lot of people, a lot of spirits, humans, and a lot of loss of biodiversity in land and in the sea, in water. And what do you think about that balance between the spirits of the men and the spirits of the nature? Because the ethic and the moral are also not only by our human race, but also between the rest of the nature on the planet.
Thank you, Paolo. I'm not sure if that question is quite on point with our presentation, so I am going to defer that. We can correspond by email so that I can better elaborate on your question about that balance of biodiversity between the spiritual and the rest of nature. I want to stay within the scope of the spiritual transformation. Shali will go with you. Shali, we'll go with you one more time. I'm sorry, I'm butchering your name. And then we'll move forward.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No.
So I know that we were talking earlier, or I think I came in like at the end of the bit, so I apologize if it doesn't fit, perfectly. But I heard you say something about the like where the formless or the ideals come from is where like the good comes from, and then we have materiality. So like you have the formless where the ideas accumulate, and then you have materiality, which is like here. And so this is basically flawed, and right is the materiality, and then where the ideals and the like ideas come from the formless would be the I guess I want to say like not flawed, depending.
Right.
Is that right? Is that
That's correct. So according to Plato believed that the realm of forms was the realm of being, and that materiality was the realm of becoming, and that everything here, including the human form, is a flawed copy. It's imperfect. And in that case, I've established why he thinks the tripartite creates that conflict with humans. And so ultimately, we're trying to touch the forms so that we can better figure out how to perfect what's down here in materiality. And to the comment about ritual, that's a way to integrate with the forms, to touch the essence through ritual. So we are looking at trying to bring down the perfect into the imperfect, or at least bring us up is probably a better way to look at it, so that we can better interact with that. Ava, I'm going to defer you really quick because we are out of time, and I just want to get to the last slide. I'm going to jump a lot, and then I'll stay on about 5-10 minutes afterwards to answer any questions. All right, so we only got to, let me move this around so I can see, step 4. That's not even half. All right, so we have all these steps, and again, this is posted on YouTube, I think, right after the recording?
It's being posted as we speak.
Oh, it's being posted right now, I didn't know. So you can look at the steps more in detail if you want to go to YouTube, and you can search Masonic Seminar Series and you'll see our past recordings. But when we look at this, we're all in different stages. And again, like I said, there's micro caves, and no one's ever like in this life, like all the way at the end, unless you're, you believe in Buddhas and avatars and stuff like that, which perhaps they exist. But the one thing I want to get to is this last step, which is not step 10. Remember, I told you there's actually a step 11. And the whole point of spiritual transformation on the individual level is to, again, realign get rid of that conflict that exists between the body, the psyche, and the spirit, and put the spirit in charge of the human form, the human nature. But ultimately, is to come back and return to the city. This is the Bodhisattva vow, for those who are familiar with that, where you perfect yourself. You're constantly perfecting yourself over and over and over. So that way when you come back, you can help those that need your help. And again, if you believe in the great teachers and sages of all time, I'd like to think, and I don't have any evidence to prove it, that they chose to return to this back to humanity and help us get through. You know, the people who have wise words and help us on our most trying moments, even if their wise words piss us off and make us angry because they're, you know, cutting. Like this is the whole point, is to serve humanity. A Mason's journey, and I've said this a lot and I will say it again, is not for self-aggrandizement. It is a byproduct that we become, hopefully, greater and greater and greater. The whole teleology of it, the whole purpose, is to come back and help humanity. You can't help them if you don't have your oxygen mask on. You have to work and work and work on trying to spiritually perfect yourself so that your spirit can commune with the divine spirit, and you can help society become, even if, like, you don't have to be the greatest, you know, Buddha on the planet or the greatest Christ figure on the planet. You don't have to be those things. You just have to be that great person in someone's life that helps them get to their next step. And your job is satisfied until, in my opinion, you come bound for the next round. You keep returning to the city until all of the city, to use a biblical phrase, is translated, until everything is brought up into the next phase of human evolution. It's kind of the idea of we're all in this together. We're all trying to get us all up. And it's not about me doing the left-hand path, which is just doing all this for my personal gain. And I want to leave with this quote. And I told you it was going to be Eckhart, so don't be surprised. And I'm just going to say really quick before I read it to you, I've always resonated with the divine spark, but I felt that Eckhart really put this in better terms. So it's not like a revolutionary quote, but it was a very, I think, defining quote. The seed of God is in us. Given an intelligent, hardworking farmer, it will thrive and grow up to God, whose seed it is, and accordingly, its fruits will be God nature. Pear seeds grow into pear trees, nut seeds into nut trees, and God seeds into God. And I often think about how every one of us, if we, you know, have people keep coming back and helping and tilling the ground and giving the right nutrients to our tripartite aspects, that we can grow into what has been planted within us, that God seed that becomes the great architect that assists in the cosmos, that is a part of the divine plan, and to be Pythagorean in nature, to resonate with the harmony of the spheres. That is ultimately what I believe that Freemasonry is trying to get us to understand. We are not the many labels that we give ourselves, that ultimately within us resides a seed that is divine, and that it will sprout if you nourish it. You can kill it stone dead if you like. That's a will that you have to enforce. But ultimately, Masonry is trying to till the nutrients in which that soil, or which that seed is sitting in, so that it can grow into what it needs to be. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sorry we did not get through the whole presentation. I always strive to do so, but your comments and questions were wonderful. I want to thank everyone for coming out, whether it was here in North America or if it was in the Philippines or anywhere else in the world. Thank you for spending your hour and a half with us here at Universal Co-Masonry. We really enjoy our time with you. And all of you have my email because I'm the one that emails you the invitations. So please feel free to share comments or questions and have that dialogue throughout the course of the month. We will meet again next month. I have no idea what we're going to present because I always, like I say, I like to intuit it to see, you know, it is what we are supposed to be talking about in the moment. So please be on the lookout for those emails. I send them towards the beginning of the month, and you will be here at the same time, same place. Thank you, Brother Patrick and Brother Benjamin, and all of you. I will stay for 5 more minutes. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. The rest of you have a wonderful night, and I'll see you next month.